Ranjana Yasodhanandana Brajajana Ranjana Yamuna Tiravana Yadi Yamuna Tiravana Yadi Jaya Radha Madhava Kunya Vihari Radha Madhava Kunya Vihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunya Vihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunya Vihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Jasodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Jasodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Jamuna Tiravana Jadi Jamuna Tiravana Jadi Jaya Radha Madhava Kunjabi Hari Madhava Kunjabi Jaya Radha Madhava Kunjabi Hari Madhava Kunjabihari Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna, Krishna Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare. Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada. Nitai God Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitai God Hari Bol, oh, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitai God Hari Bol. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahamsa, Parivijayacharya Astatarasatasi, Srimad His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki, Gaura Premanandi. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Nice to be able to have gatherings again in the temple. Socially distanced with masks, with masks, right? Where's your mask? Didn't bring it? She's got an extra. Well, shortly we'll be seeing a little image on the screen, hopefully. The temple here has been involved in weekly, 5 times a week discussions on Bhagavad Gita, and then again on the Sunday program, some topic about Bhagavad Gita. This is chapter 15. Chapter 15 is called Purushottam Yoga. And chapter 15 comes after chapter 14. In chapter 14, Krishna is describing the modes of material nature in great detail. And the modes of nature find their way into this chapter also, but at the conclusion of chapter 14, Krishna gives a description that says it's possible to become free from the modes of material nature. And the method of becoming free from the modes of material nature is by devotional service. And that's the starting point for the next chapter. Because in order to be engaged in devotional service, there has to be a prerequisite is having proper understanding and detachment from this material creation. Proper understanding means this creation belongs to God. It's his property, and we're visitors in his property. And so therefore the material nature and all of its various features is meant for God's enjoyment. It's meant for our offering it or things, paraphernalia, for God's service. That's the right understanding. Oh, look at that. Okay. So that's where this chapter begins, where we're getting a picture. There's 4 sections in this chapter. No, please, no garland. Hey, people. Thanks. I've just been COVID precaution, no garlands. That's. Thank you. Seeing the material world as something that's not meant as an object of our worldly enjoyment, but is meant as an object or paraphernalia for Krishna's service. Detachment from the mode of enjoyment and attachment to the Supreme Person and aspiring to enter into that region. That's the first section, which makes up the first five verses of this chapter 15. So Purushottama, Purusha means person or man, and Uttama is supreme. So it's the yoga of the Supreme Person. Yoga of the Supreme Person. There we are, chapter 15. Now, some of you have been to Jagannath Puri. And Jagannath Puri, one of the names it's known by is Purushottam Kshetra. Kshetra means field or place. The place of the Supreme Person, Purushottam Kshetra. It's where the Supreme Lord is manifesting opulences to the maximum. As he does in Dwarka, he also does in Jagannath Puri. It's the Dwarka mood, the Purushottama mood. So we're going to hear something in this chapter also about opulences, ways to appreciate and become attracted to the Supreme Person is the opulences of the Supreme Person. And very interesting ways of describing that. Now, the opulences of the Supreme Person, there's a whole chapter dedicated to that, chapter 10. So there's something that's similar to chapter 10 in chapter 15. And there's one other thing that's similar. I'm just making some parallels here. What's chapter 9 of Bhagavad Gita? Most confidential knowledge, right? So this chapter 15 ends in the same note. It's the most confidential. And the confidential knowledge is being identified. And then those that understand that confidential knowledge, that's the entry into the spiritual world. The qualification, the adhikar, is to understand the position of God in relation to this world, in relation to ourselves. And he's above. Well, so we'll hear that this is a little summary of the chapter. So, yeah. Becoming detached from the material world. This is the first of 4 sections. Yeah. There's a nice lotus flower. The message is, this is a little summary of what the message is of this first section. one should detach himself from the material world, which is a reflection of the spiritual world. And with that understanding, surrender to Krishna, because he's the source of which this reflection comes, or from which this reflection comes. That's a quick summary of the first 5 verses. So the Supreme Personality of Godhead said, "It is said that there is an imperishable banyan tree that has its roots upward." There you see a banyan tree. Whoops, there you see the banyan tree. With its roots upward and its branches down. Branches down. You've seen this painting before. At the very, very top of the painting, that's Lord Brahma. That's the root or the source or the stem of this banyan tree. And then the banyan tree grows with its branches down and the roots up. So that's the banyan tree, upside down tree. And his leaves, the leaves of the banyan tree, are the Vedic hymns. Now the leaves of the banyan tree or the Vedic hymns, a vast portion of the Vedic hymns are meant for rituals by which the necessities of mankind are fulfilled. Necessities. So the banyan tree is like the Vedas are like a kalpavriksha tree where all desires can be achieved. And the means of achieving those desires is by connecting with God through Vedic hymns. The Vedic hymns yield necessities for all mankind. And Krishna goes on to say, one who knows this tree is the knower of the Vedas. So there's the tree again. But take a look closely at that painting. The tree is a reflection on a lake. And the lake is the lake of desire. And on the other side of that lake is where the reflection comes from. That's the tree of the spiritual world. So on the right side, the image is Rig, Yajur, Sama, and Atharva Veda, these 4 Vedas. And one who knows the tree becomes the knower of the Vedas. So what does that mean? Who is a knower of the Vedas? It is when it is said that a person knows the Vedas, it's assumed that he knows how to cut off attachment to this material world. There's a fellow on the right side, looks like a Boy Scout, cutting down a tree. So he knows how to cut down a tree. So the knower of the Vedas who know how to cut the material attachment to the material world. Material attachment means I am the enjoyer of the resources of nature. And to cut off that attachment doesn't mean cut the material world, but the attachment to being enjoyer of, independent enjoyer of, apart from God, enjoyer of. The Vedas are teaching to do that. And one who knows the Vedas knows how to do that. If one knows that process, he actually knows the Vedas. And conversely, one who is attracted by the ritualistic formulas of the Vedas, that's the leaves, the hymns, is attracted by the beautiful green leaves of the tree. He does not exactly know the purpose of the Vedas. That's one who doesn't know the purpose and one that does know the purpose. One who does know the purpose of the Vedas, it implies he knows how to cut off attachment to this material world. So once again, we have this picture of a reflection of the real tree. The real tree is on the top, and the reflection is in the bottom. And that's just a painting of a banyan tree. And anyone that's seen a banyan tree, it looks like a banyan tree. The branches are in the bottom. You can't tell which is the trunk and which is the root. And similarly, on the right side, there's the spiritual world where we belong. And down there on the left-hand side of the painting is the material world where we don't belong. That's where we are now. And what the transition place from the spiritual to the material is the desire to be the enjoyer. Again, to know the Vedas means to know that, to cut that tendency to be the enjoyer of the material, separate from Krishna, enjoyer of this material energy. Another image that says the same thing. If one can understand this indestructible tree of illusion, it's indestructible, but it can be destroyed. In other words, without the weapon of knowledge and detachment, jnana vairagya, knowledge of what it is, it's otherwise indestructible, but it is destructible. You don't destroy the world, but you can destroy the illusion that it's meant for my independent of God enjoyment. Then one can get out of it. When one has a little discrimination like this, one can then become detached. And by that see more. Then further discrimination comes, and then further detachment. It's a gradual progression from attachment to and forgetfulness of Krishna, forgetfulness of God. In that forgetfulness of God, it's up for grabs. The material world, I can make it mine and try to be the enjoyer. And in God consciousness, that attachment to be the independent enjoyer fades progressively, step by step. And the proprietorship of God and the purpose of all things meant for the service of God becomes restored. Then Krishna continues in this chapter. The branches, what happened? There we go. There we go. The branches of this tree extend downward and upward, nourished by the three modes of material nature. See those three ladies? They disappeared. Now there they are again. The three mode ladies, goodness, passion, and ignorance. So the branches, the up and down movement of the branches going up and down, it's that they're nourished by the three modes of material nature. The twigs are the objects of the senses. What happened? Okay, there's the three ladies, the three modes. There. The twigs are the object of the senses. This tree also has roots going down, and these are bound to the fruitive actions of human society. So look on the chart, you see pious acts and impious acts. The pious acts go up, impious acts go down, and there's some fruits. That's the fruit of sense gratification. And there are different species of life trying to be enjoyers. The real form of this tree cannot be perceived in this world. The real form is what's on the other side of the lake, from which this is a reflection. So the spiritual realm from which this material realm is rejection, the real form of the tree cannot be perceived in this world. No one can understand where it ends, where it begins, or where its foundation is. The foundation of this tree is in the spiritual world. So by worldly inspection, won't understand the foundation. But with discrimination, one must cut down the strongly rooted tree with the weapon of detachment. There's the weapon of detachment. It's an axe. The axe of detachment is sharpened by knowledge and discrimination. Now that's those of you that are familiar with Bhagavad Gita, many of you have been reading it and studying it for a few months, most likely, along with the temple. Discrimination is a function of intelligence. Now, there's a negative sense of discrimination, like discriminating against a certain group of people. But the positive sense of discrimination is to discern one thing from another thing. Like, there's a pair of kartals, and one can say there's symbols, but it's not the symbols we're discriminating. It's not the symbols that a drummer in a rock band plays. It's still symbol. So we're discriminating between one thing and another thing. Or IQ tests. IQ tests are examining an individual's capacity to discriminate one thing from another thing. You've taken IQ tests, so you know there's a series of 4 things, and which one is the oddball out. And they designed it in such a way that if you don't really think deeply, you're not discriminating, you'll select the wrong one. So anyway, that's what intelligence is. It's a factor of discriminating one thing from another thing. So discrimination in this sense is, this is temporary and that's eternal. And let me invest in that which is eternal, and I'll take responsible action in dealing with the temporary, but I'll also understand with discrimination that the temporary is meant for God's service, whatever that is. Whatever stage of life we're involved in something that's temporary. At different stages of life, nature has it, that we have different involvements in different things. Small children are riding tricycles, and that's not what we do. But what we do is not what they do. So there's different objects of attraction and fascination for each stage of life. And discrimination is to see that those things are meant for serving and bringing oneself closer to God. That's the positive sense or the right sense of discrimination. And intelligence, of which discrimination is a factor, is strengthened by knowledge. So we read Bhagavad Gita or any other scriptures for the purpose of strengthening our knowledge of God, and with that knowledge of God, detachment from the worldly sense of being an exploiter of the material world. That's what the tree represents, this reflection tree. With determination, one must cut down the strongly rooted tree with the weapon of detachment. So that should be clear. Oh, that's what happens. It goes back 2 at a time. There we go. Thereafter, so after that detachment comes attachment to the spiritual realm, the real tree from which this one is a reflection. Thereafter, one must seek that place from which, having gone, one never returns. That's also part of discernment or discrimination or a faculty of intelligence. And what do you do there? You surrender to that Supreme Personality of Godhead, from whom everything began, and from whom everything has extended since time immemorial. This is a nice painting of a king who has been very fortunate to come before Lord Sankarshan. Lord Sankarshan is the preceptor that taught the four Kumaras. It's where the four Kumara Sampradaya comes from, Lord Sankarshan, with his four arms. So, surrender. Detachment from the temporary, the enjoyment spirit of the temporary, cut with the weapon of knowledge and discernment, and take shelter of that Supreme Person. Okay, so that's the first section, the first 5 verses. I'll say it again, just so as we go along. The end of chapter 14, Krishna says you can overcome the influence of the modes of nature by devotional service. The transition is to be eligible for devotional service when there must be some degree of detachment from the mood of being the enjoyer of worldly things or materialistic consciousness. And then in that detachment from materialistic consciousness comes the possibility of attachment to the supreme abode, that tree from which this world is a reflection. And go there and take shelter of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So now we're ready for section 2. Section 2. Where's the text? No text. Well, my screen has a text, so I'll tell you what it says. It's verses 6 through 11. I don't know why it doesn't show. But so the second section is verses 6 through 11 that speaks about transmigration. Now, how does the transmigration fit in to all of this? If you stay in the material world, you stay in that upside down tree, there's you're not able to return to the spiritual world. And so there's this process of knowledge that understands how we move from one branch to the other branch, or one form of life to another form of life. The transmigration of the soul is explained. And then there's fallible and infallible living entities, and Krishna is above them all. And so take shelter of Krishna. That's the summary of the chapter. That supreme abode of mind, he's describing the place from which this reflection comes. That supreme abode of mind is not illuminated by the sun or moon, nor by fire or electricity. We know that we're familiar with this verse from Bhagavad Gita. Those who reach it never return to this material world. You cut the tree, and now you're no longer attracted by the glitter of the reflection. You're seeing the real tree. And when you know what that real tree is, their spiritual world, and you go there, you never return. Now, this is stated in many other places also, but it's right here in Bhagavad Gita. Now comes, those of you that like to learn verses, there's 2 verses in this chapter I recommend you learn if you haven't learned. This is one of them, very celebrated verse. You can say it along with me if you like. Mame vangsa jiva loke, jiva bhuta sanatana, anakshastani indriyani, Prakriti stani karshati. Nice sounding verse. It's describing the position of living entities. Now we're going into transmigration. The spiritual realm is there's no sun, moon, or electricity. And then comes the living entities. Living entities in this conditioned world are my eternal fragmental parts. So the spiritual world doesn't have any illumination. Living entities are his fragmental parts. Those in this world, the paintings show, fireworks or something on the left side. And then the right side is the soul and super soul situated in the heart of every living entity. Then, nice understanding, due to conditioned life, they struggle very hard with the six senses, which include the mind. Well, there's the six senses which include the mind. Let's go back a bit. Somehow, what's on my screen is not on yours. And I don't know how that's happening. So above the eye is an ear. Above the ear is a mouth. Over there on the left, that's a nose. And of course, the sense of touch. And centered around the mind. You can't read it so well. Right on the screen is the mind. There it is. There's the other images. The mind's that poor fellow in the center where the senses are being pulled. Some hand is pulling his tongue, his eyes, his ear, his sense of touch. That's the lady pinching him or something. And so, the five senses are grouped around the mind. This is important. This is important Sankhya topic. The Sankhya topic says these five senses, six senses which include the mind, they're all subtle. I'll say it again. Make this distinction or discrimination. There's my hand and there's the sense of touch. There's this thing in the eye socket called the eyeball, and there's a sense of sight. The sense of sight is connected to the mind. The sense of smell is connected to the mind. And so when the soul moves from one body to the next, the mind goes, and so do the senses, not the gross physical, but the subtle sense grouped around the mind. You got it? It's important. In Sankhya, it's important. And when one has that position where the mind is being pulled by so many senses, it's somehow not working. Very frustrating. It's supposed to show a fellow being pulled by chains. Hello? I can't fix it here. Technology is great when it works. There's the guy. And, so the chains of false ego. And he doesn't look like he's having a nice time. Okay. So one's conditioned due to conditioned life, they are struggling very hard with the six senses, which include the mind. That's Krishna's words. The living entity in the material world carries his different conceptions of life from one body to another as the air carries aromas. Now, what is it that carries conceptions of life? When you're alive, where's the conceptions of life carried? In the mind, right? Conceptions of life are carried in the mind. So here's a guy that's got some conceptions in his mind. And I just found this out yesterday, I think. We drove past a really tall tower. And I want to know what's that. And it's a tower commemorating Thomas A. Edison that discovered the light bulb. And that's how the name Edison came from Thomas Edison. So somewhere in the head of Thomas Edison, I don't know if that photograph is a drawing of him, the one at the bottom, but he had the idea. He had a conception that he could make a light bulb. And sure enough, he made a light bulb. It took a few hundred times, but he was very determined. And he made a light bulb. And so similarly, as air carries aroma, the mind carries conceptions of life. Now, in the upper left, that's a nice garden. On the upper right, that's a factory. And the bottom, it looks like Beijing. And I can tell you it's not quite like that, but it's really awful. Really awful. I was riding in a car in Beijing, and it was around 2:00 in the afternoon, and it was almost like the sun had set. And I said, "What happened? Did someone turn the lights out?" And they said, "No, that's the smog in Beijing. It's so thick. It's so thick. It's not like, anyway, it's not like other cities in India don't have really bad air pollution." Without going into it. So air carries aroma, and the mind, the living entity through the agency of the mind, carries conceptions of life from one body to the other. So the conceptions of life go with the soul, the mind goes with the soul, the subtle senses go with the soul, and we're different. We're different than all those things. Thus, he takes one kind of body and again quits it to take another. You can't read, but it says to take another at the bottom of the screen. So I was trying before I came here to get this little video to work. See that looks like a bowl on the right side? If anybody here has a copy of that little video, can you raise your hand, because I couldn't find it? But when it's working properly, it's not right now. You click on the thing, and that bowl starts to move, and it becomes a lady with long hair, and it starts to move, and it becomes a handsome man, and it starts to move, and it becomes some other species of life, and it starts to move, and it goes back to being a bowl. Does anybody here have that video? If anybody online has that video, please let me know, because it's nice. It illustrates. So the living entity thus taking another gross body obtains a certain type of ear, eye, tongue, nose, and sense of touch, which are grouped about the mind. He thus enjoys a particular set of sense objects. Now, this is about transmigration, but it's a little bit more detailed, because not only you get another body, but the subtle senses go with you, and then you're awarded a certain set of sense objects to accommodate your senses. Right? Like bumblebees are attracted to what bumblebees are attracted to, and we're not attracted like they are. And mosquitoes are attracted to what they're attracted to, and we're not attracted to. But they have a certain set of senses grouped around the mind, and they get a body accordingly, a gross body, to accommodate the subtle body. The subtle body is being wrapped by the gross. You have it? You found it. Just forward it to me. I won't do it now because I don't know how to show it now. Okay, great. Fantastic. Good for you. The very same thing shows this guy on the screen? Okay. You got a ring through his nose. Nice fellow. Okay. Whoa. Okay, well, the next image is also very nice. The next image, it says, I'll just explain it before we go there. Next image, it says that the elements are naturally pure, but when the elements become mixed with other things, like water is pure or air is pure, but it mixes with other things that it takes on colors or aromas or something other than its natural state. So similarly, the mind and senses, like the soul, have the original pure condition. Even though, there's a pure mind, and there's also the material mind. And the process of spiritual elevation is to purify the mind and senses by the medium of devotional service. This is interesting. The technology that's not working, and the children that are babbling, and the curtain is closing, and you got neck beach. Can you send me the link so I can later download it? Okay. Oh, he's changing again. Okay. So that's just to illustrate the message. The message is the living entity, thus taking another gross body, obtains a certain type of ear, eye, tongue, nose, and sense of touch, which are grouped about the mind. Thus, he enjoys a particular set of sense objects. So now this is the next message, and that is water in its original is originally pure, but if we mix water with certain color, it changes. There it is, it's changing by mixing with color. So what is this meant to illustrate? There's our present condition, that's somebody doing some scuba diving, and if that's the kind of experience they like, they may in their next life become one of those guys, a scuba diver. Or in our present lifetime, if this is something we enjoy very much, then we may become a bird. Prabhupada would speak about the people that when he was on the beach, he saw surfers, so they may become a dolphin in their next life. They like riding on the waves. then the understanding that Prabhupada presents in his purports here is that karma is performed by the subtle body and not only the gross body. It's clear, right? And why it's clear. So therefore, it's very important when we do some activity, devotional service, what's our motive? What's our desire? What's our goal? What's the subtle activity or makeup behind it? For example, Prabhupada's example, Krishna tells Arjuna to fight with his body and not the mind. If Arjuna were to go to the forest, he would fight in the mind anyway, because that was his conditioned nature. Better to fix his mind in Krishna and fight with the body. So it's explaining the transmigration of the soul, but also when you do devotional service, the alternative to what makes souls transmigrate, be very clear what the mind should be doing, manmana. Then the conclusion of this section, the foolish cannot understand how a living entity can quit his body. Nor can they understand what sort of body he will enjoy under the spell of the modes of nature. However, read Bhagavad Gita. Oops. Yeah, but one whose eyes are trained in knowledge can see all this. So the training is over on the right, and what they're being trained is shown over on the left. The transmigration of the soul process. An example, Dhritarashtra also heard the Bhagavad Gita, but he didn't understand because he was attached. So, fooled by lust and desire, they lose all power to understand their change of body. Now remember, this is in the Purushottam Yoga, the context in describing transmigration is how to get out of that tree, the reflection of the real thing, and to go to the real thing. So it requires some knowledge and detachment from the reflection of the real thing and some proper understanding of the real thing, the original tree. It requires a great amount of knowledge heard from a bona fide spiritual master to understand how the soul changes bodies. Therefore, those who are highly developed in Krishna consciousness, this is not Bhagavad Gita verse, it's Prabhupada. Those who are highly developed in Krishna consciousness try their best to give this knowledge to the people in general, for their conditional life is very much troublesome. And in the upper right is Vyasadeva, providing the knowledge of Krishna through the Vedas. And the Vedas are teaching what material life is like. Srila Prabhupada taking upon himself the task of risking everything to bring this knowledge to people who are very much captured by conditional life, knowing that it's very much difficult for them. So compassion. And the last verse of this section, the endeavoring transcendentalists who are situated in self-realization can see all this clearly. The image is showing Prabhupada looking at people who are in this unfortunate condition and actually seeing the soul is the unfortunate condition, not just the body, and the worldly circumstance is the unfortunate condition. But those whose minds are not developed and who are not situated in self-realization cannot see what is taking place, though they may try to. Again, on the right side is Dhritarashtra. He's hearing everything. Sanjaya gets it, but Dhritarashtra doesn't get it. I don't know, the poor fellow looks like he's pulling his own tie. Okay, that's the section number 2. And we have just 2 more sections to go. And in section number 3, what is Krishna's position as a maintainer? So we have a relation with this world, although it's illusory, and necessities are supplied by the one who is maintaining everyone and everything. There's scales of that higher management arrangement. Here's Baladev Vidyabhusan's commentary. Krishna is saying, I alone accomplish the material enjoyment from my angsa, the jiva, who is attached to the material world. And I alone accomplish the liberation for the jiva, desiring freedom from the material world. This is explained in 4 verses. So 12, 13, 14, 15. And then we'll close in on the end of the chapter. There are these 4 categories. He maintains the cosmos. He maintains the world, in the temporary world in which we live, like the earthly realm, terrestrial realm. It maintains our physiological requirements and our spiritual requirements. That's putting it in a simple language, what these 4 verses are touching on. So let's go to what the verse says. There. Okay. There's a picture of the moon and the setting sun. So verse 12 teaches us the splendor of the moon and sun and fire all come from Krishna. So here's the verses. Hopefully it'll work. There we go. The splendor of the sun, which dissipates the darkness of this whole world, comes from me. That's the sun. And the splendor of the moon. Whoops. Moon disappeared. The splendor of the moon and the splendor of fire are also from me. He's the maintainer. And whatever is splendorous, he is the source. Similar to the opulence of the Absolute, chapter 10. But, there's the specific feature of, by this, he's maintaining everyone. Know that the light situated in the sun, in the moon, and in fire, which illuminates the whole universe, belongs to me. Action for attaining the jiva's enjoyment, according to his karma, are accomplished by the light of the sun, which has risen, and the fire, which is blazing. These actions are the causes of happiness and destroy darkness and lethargy for the jiva. Shh. When the moon rises, there is nourishment of herbs, dissipation of heat and pain, and relaxation in the moonlight. The light which produces these effects in the sun, moon, and fire is my vibhuti of light. Now, some of you may not be so familiar with this term vibhuti. Chapter 10 is opulences of the Absolute, but the Sanskrit is vibhuti yoga. So vibhuti means one of Krishna's opulences, or those opulences which are of this world. And those opulences which are of this world are his vibhutis. So God's presence is in the light of the sun. God's presence is in the light of the moon. God's presence is in the light of the fire. They're but vibhutis of his my vibhuti of light. Now we're going to the cosmic level. I enter into each planet, and by my energy, they stay in orbit. I become, this is the next verse, chapter 13, or text 13. I become the moon, and thereby supply the juice of life to all vegetables. Now, many of you have heard, many of us have heard Prabhupada speaking that for production for crop production, it's not only sunlight that's needed, but moonlight is needed, because the moonlight supplies the juice of life to all vegetables. That's we know from Bhagavad Gita. Entering the earth, which is just a lump of dust, I make it firm. This is Baladev. And thus support all moving and non-moving things by my Shakti. The sacred text says, this is Rig Veda, it is he by whom the heavens and powerful earth are made firm. This indicates that if not for his power, the earth would perish, dissolving like a fistful of sand. Now, we're not seeing that. We see the earth or the mountains or the highways in Edison, New Jersey, and whatever the other things that we can see. But the firmness of them, Baladev Vidyabhusan is saying, from this verse of Bhagavad Gita, we can understand it's a Shakti of Krishna that makes it firm. And if it weren't for that firmness, potency of the Supreme Lord, the whole thing would just dissolve. So we're dependent, and we're grateful because it doesn't so easily dissolve. Sometime it'll dissolve. Becoming, this is again Baladev, becoming the moon made of nectar, rasatmaka soma, I nourish all plants such as rice. I make things full of various tasty flavors for the jivas situated on the earth and enjoying various tastes. I alone accomplish their experience of various tastes after making the places of enjoyment, such as palaces, gardens, tanks, and playgrounds from earth. So there's a moon in the branches of the tree. Now, how is this connected with Purushottam Yoga? We're seeing through the eyes of Scripture, through the eyes of Krishna's words, we may be able to see, with detachment from seeing objects as objects meant for us to enjoy, that Krishna is behind it all. We may be able to see like that and discern properly. I am the fire of digestion. See that image in the center of that form is a fire, and there's Agni. Can't tell so well, but I can see it better on my computer. There's a little fire, like a yagya, and Agni is rising from the fire. I, Krishna, because he's the light of this and that, he's the fire of digestion in the bodies of all living entities. I join with the air of life, outgoing and incoming, to digest the 4 kinds of foodstuff. And here's an interesting text, Baladev again. I alone am the cause of digesting food such as rice and other enjoyable items, becoming the fire of the stomach, accepting that small body, taking shelter in the stomachs of all living beings, and being engaged with the prana and apana, which enliven the stomach. I bring about the digestion of the 4 types of food eaten by the living entities. The Shruti says from the Upanishads, the Lord is the fire of digestion, which is within man and by which food is digested. The fact that I alone am the body of the digestive fire, assisting in digestion, is also stated by the author of Vedanta, that's Vyasadeva. So similar statements. But what's in Bhagavad Gita is being confirmed in the Upanishads and in Vedanta Sutra. And finally, in this section, another verse that's very nice for you to memorize if you haven't already. So we can say it together. Sarvasya chaham hridi sannivishto matak smatir jnanam apohanam cha Vedaisya sairvair aham eva vedyo Vedanta krid veda vid eva chaham. Nice verse. Looks like Lord Chaitanya, and in the heart is Krishna. So I am seated in everyone's heart. And from me comes remembrance, knowledge, and forgetfulness. The fellows over on the right look like they're forgetting. And the one with all the post-its all over, maybe he's trying to remember something. And that nice bright student, he's got super soul lights on. By all the Vedas, I am to be known. Indeed, I am the compiler of Vedanta, and I am the knower of the Vedas. Very important verse. Very important verse. So the knower of the Vedas, we heard earlier, it means they know how to cut the attachment to worldly enjoyment of the temporary. And it also means they know what's the purpose of that. The purpose of detachment is not just detachment for detachment's sake, so you can become God, but or become whatever, released from suffering, if you're a Buddhist. Just, have no attraction for anything. But it's the purpose is to know Krishna. Very simple. The purpose of the Vedas is to know Krishna. And by the Vedas, he is to be known. And he knows this correctly because he's the compiler of Vedanta. That means Krishna Dvaipayana Vyas compiled Vedanta. And he's the knower of the Vedas. So here's some nice text. This is Vishwanath. Just as I am the fire in the stomach, I'm also dwelling in the hearts of all moving and non-moving entities in the form of the element buddhi or intelligence. It doesn't say specifically super soul, but the element of buddhi. So buddhi and super soul are inextricable. From me, mataha, in the form of intelligence, there is remembrance of sensations from objects previously perceived. From me, there's also knowledge arising through contact of the senses with the sense objects, and also the removal of both knowledge and memory. Having told how he helps the jiva in his bound state, the Lord then tells how he assists the jiva to attain liberation. Remember, he's the maintainer of the worldly situation, but he's also the giver of liberation. I am known through the Vedas. I alone made Vedanta through Veda Vyas, because I alone know the Vedas. I know the real meaning of the Vedas, and no one except me knows the real meaning. That's pretty authoritative. So Krishna is the maintainer. This is a summary of that section we just went through, part 3 or section 3. He's the maintainer of our spiritual requirements. He's the maintainer of cosmology. He's the maintainer of worldly requirements. He's the maintainer of our bodily requirements. He's the maintainer of everything in all respects. So now we're ready for this final section. Krishna is going to explicitly glorify what's in these 3 verses, in the final verses of the chapter. It's just 3 verses, but it's 3 verses that one can say is a summary of the Vedas. So listen carefully, because it sounds like it's really important. Summary of all the Vedas and Vedanta. Now, the first of these verses is explaining there's the fallible and the infallible jivas. That fellow in the lower right, that's the conditioned soul turning its back on Krishna and going into the field of the material energy. And in the left-hand side, that's the spiritual realm. So there's the infallible ones over on the left side, and the fallible ones are heading over to the right side. There are 2 classes of beings. There's one. Fallible. And then there's the infallible. Hanuman. Infallible. In the material world, every living entity is fallible. And he's, we're pointing out some heroes. There's Napoleon in the upper left, Gandhi in the middle, even Mother Teresa. And over there is like everybody else. In the material world, every living entity is fallible. Every living entity is fallible. There's a very interesting comment on this. Living entities in this material world are fallible. One of our Sanskrit scholars points out that in Jiva Goswami's writing, in one of his writings, he was teaching how to learn Sanskrit grammar through names of Krishna. And he wrote a letter to one of his friends, please look through and see if you find any mistakes. And please let me know. Indicating, Jiva Goswami is fallible. Now, we look upon him, our great acharyas, they're beyond mistakes. They're perfected beings, and the imperfected beings have the tendency to make mistakes, imperfect senses, etc. Anyway, in the material world, every living entity is fallible. And in the spiritual world, every living entity is called infallible. Now, this is in one of the 3 essential verses. There's fallible and infallible. Krishna is beyond both. Besides these 2, this is the next text, hopefully. Besides these 2, there is the greatest personality, the Supreme Soul, the imperishable Lord himself. Now, what's here in this Bhagavad Gita, chapter 15, text 17, it's found in Uddhava Gita. It's found in Uddhava Gita. If you like to read Prabhupada's books, you'll find it in Canto 11, chapter 11, where Krishna speaks like this to Arjuna, or to Uddhava. And that Supreme Soul has entered the 3 worlds. That's an image of the 3 worlds. Check it out. And he's maintaining them. Vishnu, the maintainer. And then the third of these verses, because I am transcendental beyond both the fallible and the infallible, and because I am the greatest, over there on the right side, that's Lord Vishnu and all the personalities, Garuda and Shiva and Brahma and everybody else, honoring Vishnu, because I'm the greatest. I am celebrated both in the world and in the Vedas as that supreme person. So this is the Purushottam Yoga message. He is the supreme person who we are to connect with. That's the declaration of this verse 18. Now there's different aspects. There's the Brahman aspect, the Paramatma aspect, the Bhagavan aspect. We know about this from the Bhagavatam. These are all aspects or features of that supreme person. And the last, section 5. I've been saying there's 4 sections, it's 5 sections. Knowing Krishna means knowing everything. So how'd you like to know everything? It's very simple, just know Krishna. So here's the concluding verses of this whole chapter 15. Whoever knows me as the Supreme Personality of Godhead without doubting, that fellow over on the right looks like he's doubting. But the one who knows Krishna as the Supreme Personality of Godhead without doubting is the knower of everything. That looks like Jiva Goswami writing down what he knows about Krishna. One who knows Krishna becomes the knower of everything. He therefore engages himself in full devotional service to me, O son of Bharata. Knowing the meaning of these 3 verses, this is now our commentator explaining. Knowing the meaning of these 3 verses, that's 15, 16, 17, and 18. Knowing the meaning of these 3 verses, he is the knower of everything, sarvavit, because these 3 verses are the purport of the Vedas. He who knows my position as the Supreme Person worships me by all methods, sarva bhavena. He who gets my mercy can know the meaning of all the Vedas and perform all the angas of bhakti. We just need mercy. We need a lot of mercy. But he who doubts my position as the Supreme Person, even though he has studied all the Vedas, is actually ignorant. And even if he worships by all methods, he is not a devotee. Now, I didn't make this PowerPoint presentation, somebody else did. It shows a chart. I think it's used to teach Bhakti Shastri. You know, down at the bottom is acquiring information, data. The process is information gathering. Then people that have that information, they think they have knowledge, but there's higher and higher and higher. And the application of, proper application of knowledge is devotional service. And the final verse in the chapter, verse 20, begins, iti guyatmam shastram. That is, Krishna saying that this knowledge that I'm just now explaining to you is the most confidential part. I guess it's even more confidential part than the most confidential part in chapter 9. This is the most confidential part of Vedic scriptures, O sinless one. And it is disclosed now by me. Whoever understands this will become wise. And his endeavors will know perfection. That's Dhruva, who came to know perfection. So endeavor must be combined with abundant mercy from the Supreme Lord. Here's Prabhupada explaining, and we're going to end. While one is performing devotional service, In the association of pure devotees, in full Krishna consciousness, there are certain things which are required to be vanquished altogether. The most important thing one has to surmount is weakness of the heart. There's the weakness of the heart image with a band-aid and some patches and everything. The first fall down is caused by the desire to lord it over material nature. Thus, one gives up the transcendental loving service of the Supreme Lord. The second weakness of the heart is that one increases the propensity to lord it over material nature. He becomes attached to matter and the possession of matter. The problems of material existence are due to these weaknesses of heart. Now, this is expressed in chapter 2, Hridaya Dorbalya. Krishna uses this phrase in speaking to Arjuna. So what's in the final section of Bhagavad Gita, including this chapter 15, is expanding on knowledge already presented. So this weakness of heart is now being elaborated upon. Weakness in terms of desiring to be the Lord of material nature, the imitation Purusha. We're meant to be the enjoyed as the servant, but instead imitating the position of the Purusha. That's the starting weakness of heart or fall down. And then next is increasing the propensity, become attached to our situation, whatever it is. And that loops right back to the beginning of this chapter. The detachment from the position that we become accustomed to being the enjoyer of Prakriti. Question, is it possible? Answer, yes. We need effort and we need mercy. We need to have proper knowledge, and with that sword or axe of knowledge, cut the attachment, the affinity to being enjoyer in our favorite way, whatever that is, and replace it with the natural affinity of the soul. This affinity of the soul to see that whatever opportunity is in front of us is an opportunity for service to Krishna. That's devotional service. Rishikena Rishikesha Sevanam. Objects are meant, and with gratitude in our heart, that we're all being maintained in ways we don't even think about, we don't understand, but we're being maintained. Krishna is revealing some of the ways in which there's the foundation for our feeling of great gratitude. So, conclusion. What are some of the weaknesses that we experience and how to overcome them? Get out your weights and start lifting. That's the heart lifting, letting go and moving forward towards Krishna. That's the conclusion of this chapter. And our gratitude goes to Srila Prabhupada for giving us this knowledge of Bhagavad Gita in such a clear manner. Of course, Krishna for speaking Bhagavad Gita for our benefit, but delivering it to all of us. And then, we can be deliverers of that message to others too, not only by distributing books, certainly by distributing books, but by being exemplary personalities that display the teachings of Bhagavad Gita. We can be little perambulatory Bhagavad Gitas by the way that we live our lives. And that's very compelling. I met some people today that were newly introduced to Krishna consciousness, and they became interested in Krishna consciousness, having searched here and there and there and here and there for some spiritual answers to spiritual questions. And when they met the devotees, not only they had answers, but they met persons of remarkable character, and that was as compelling as the words of Bhagavad Gita. It made the words of Bhagavad Gita worth paying attention to, because the persons who are speaking those words were living lives exemplary of those words. And it's very powerful. So the confidential message seemed pretty straightforward, not so difficult, but to actually live our lives in that way, that's where the difficulty comes. So having read Bhagavad Gita, read it again and read it again and read it again, and then internalize that message and live by that message. So let's see if there's some discussion. It's now 10 after the hour. We probably have a portable microphone, yes? We have a very active light system here. There we go. Any comments or questions here? Looks like we don't need a microphone. No one's ready to discuss. Okay, thank you all for coming. Oh, you have something. You have a strong voice. You maybe don't even need a microphone. Yeah, speak. You can. I can give you this one. Okay.
Thank you so much for mentioning this. You're so great. You're so clear.
That was to wake everybody up.
You already mentioned the word. There is Krishna and Krishnas. So, it's also Krishna.
Yes, it is.
How can one to going away from what we know? Whom is not able to ask or not to is more why he is not get this to be in the vision why he is not connected. I mean, for example, first he is completely understood, but why he is not? He's completely forget.
I got about 40 to 50% of what you said. Let me say back what I think you're asking, and let me know if I'm even close. There's spiritual material energy, and the living entity. Why is it that he becomes diluted by the material energy? Because the material energy is also one of Krishna's energies. So why is it that he becomes diluted by one of Krishna's energies when it's one of Krishna's energies? Is that your question? Okay. Well, there's a certain potency within that energy of Krishna. Particularly in reciprocation with the living entity's desire to try to separately enjoy that first fall down or the first weakness of heart, trying, as desiring, aspiring to become a separate enjoyer. So You can't be a separate enjoyer. So to think that one is a separate enjoyer, you need illusion. And so that potency works to reciprocate with the living entity's desire to be a separate enjoyer. And so there's this diluting potency. But that very same energy doesn't act to dilute the living entity if the living entity sufficiently wants to return to Krishna. It acts to assist or facilitate. Same energy works to assist and facilitate remembrance of Krishna and connection with Krishna. So the struggle is not so much with the energy as it is with the regard towards that energy, the enjoying spirit, and then the diluting force, the diluting potency becomes activated. Is that? So let's say it again. Same energy can assist the living entity to make their connection with Krishna once again. Same material world, same stuff. It just acts differently according to how the living entity has regard for Krishna. Independent enjoyer, diluting. Be connected with Krishna facilitates devotional service. It's like the example Prabhupada gives of an electrician can make the one energy make something hot and another one make something cold because he knows how to do it. So like the electrician knows how to do it, Krishna knows how to do it. He can take that energy and make it diluting, and he can take that same energy and as an assistant to a life of devotion to Krishna. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay. The microphone's working now.
So in order to facilitate the individual soul's desire or demands, Krishna put a curtain.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
So unless and until then he comes and they say, okay, I it's good enough. I don't need any more curtain. I just want to come out of it.
Well, not just come out of it, but it's not just liberationist, but it's I want to again be connected with Krishna. Because it's two prongs. It's detachment and the other prong is attachment. One is detachment from the enjoying of the Prakriti. The other is the attachment to the spiritual realm, the life of unmixed service to Krishna. It's not just I want out of here. But I'm just editing your words. Is that good?
That's correct. Absolutely.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Maharaj.
Okay. That's it. Looks like we're done. Thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Ki jai. Hare Krishna. Also, don't forget, Maharaj is also giving a class tomorrow, even 7 o'clock. We'll be facilitating on the Zoom. So if anybody would like to join, so please contact one of us. Thank you. Any other announcements? Yes, we are going to celebrate. And before that, first of all, let's thank His Holiness Prabhupada Swami Maharaj, saying 3 times Haribol. Haribol, 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 for such a wonderful enlightening us. And also His Holiness Jayadeva Swami Maharaj is here with us too. Let's thank Maharaj's presence. Maharaj is so many ways. Maharaj is enlightening us pretty much every week, and so many ways, and there is no words to say that. Every day at least Maharaj is, giving the classes and giving us association. Let's also thank Maharaj, saying Haribol 3 times. Haribol, Haribol, Haribol. Thank you so much. This is our, one who says that COVID is a blessing for us in so many ways. And it gives us such a wonderful opportunity and association of such a great greats. personalities and salts. Thank you so much. And also quick announcements that we'll be having the Brahmotsav and Balram Jayanti, appearance of Lord Balaram on 21st and 22nd. There is a wonderful festivities are scheduling. There is a wonderful kirtan and there is a procession of Surya Vahan, the sun palanquin and moon palanquin. The Lord is actually going out, going around and comes with the procession, such a wonderful, devotional atmosphere and kirtan. That's on 21st August and 22nd evening. So please join. And also there is a kirtan, Mayapuris are coming. So for having a wonderful kirtan, we would like to humbly request all of you to please join. And what else is better than this? Isn't it, right? Haribol. There's nothing else better than this. So please join. And this is such a wonderful opportunity for all of us. And Lord is giving us this such a wonderful opportunity. And today I was hearing that, that we are also most fortunate, but because of we are not associating, it can all be most unfortunate. So all is very fortunate that we all have these opportunities. So please avail, please join, please participate. And also on 30th and Sri Krishna Janmashtami, 29th and 30th. So right over here, there's a great festival is scheduled and planned for it. And each and every one of you, please invite others, mention to others and invite friends and families. Having such a wonderful after, a COVID break, this is going to be a wonderful grand festival. And we would humbly request all of you to please join and participate and, just make and tell to others and make it your own. That's all fact of it. So thank you so much. Anything else? Anything else is there? Any sponsors or anything? Yes. So on the 31st, this is the greatest of all, the 125th anniversary, birth anniversary of Srila Prabhupada, our founder Acharya, is His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada. So we'll be having a great festival, grand festival on the 31st and that Tuesday. So we'd humbly request each and every one of you, don't miss this opportunity to serve Srila Prabhupada and our gratefulness and gratitude to Srila Prabhupada. That's the most that we can ever give to Srila Prabhupada. So please, we will humbly request those who are not taken the leave of, at least make a book, the leave on these days, 29, 30, this weekend, there are lots of services are there and lots of services. We would humbly request each and every one of you, please join for this and make, available yourself to serve in the different ways. And also any other sponsors or anything, anybody? Okay. So thank you so much for joining today. And also Prasadam is there. And please, everybody, please, enjoy yourself, enjoy the Prasadam. Thank you. Hare Krishna.